Great. Good, good, good. All right. So today's discussion. This month, our series topic is See You at the Closing Table. We are going to discuss um, essentially the systems that I would recommend you deploy. Some of you are going to add to it, some of you may take away, but this is going to be for you guys a 30,000-foot overview. We've talked about the closing process before, right? We talked about come behind the closing table, and you guys have seen how you locked in GG. You guys have seen, we talked about, the closing agents process, right? And we, a few weeks back, well, gosh, probably about 6 weeks now, we talked about your process, right? So we talked about Hansel. I love your lock situation. That's nice. Um, um, we talked about, hey, Lori, we talked about,
Thank you.
um, good to have you here, Lourdes. We talked about the agent's process. Joby, good to see you. We talked about the agent's process from contract to close. So this month, what we're going to do is we're going to combine the agent's process with the closing agent's process, and we're going to go over a checklist that you can use, as I mentioned, when you go under contract for closing. Now, you're going to add to this, you may take away from it, but one thing I want to share with you guys is that the way to success and the way to um, dismantle or rid yourself of chaos is to have a process, right? You got to have systems and processes. I thought to share with you guys, if you guys have probably heard the term before, your origin story, right? Your origin story is like essentially, how did I get to where I am, right? And so just to give you a little bit of background about me. So before I went into my own private practice, launching my own law firm and title company, I worked with a national law firm where we represented lenders in foreclosure, right? So it was during the foreclosure crisis. And so we represented lenders, investors in their foreclosure proceedings. And so if you guys have heard about that time period, what you heard is true. There were thousands and thousands and thousands of cases that we had to prosecute, right? And we had to prosecute them in short order. And if I could paint a picture for you of what litigation looks like, generally litigation is not something that's step by step by step. Litigation is different from transaction, right? Transaction is pretty milestone. We do this, and we do this for the most part, right? Versus litigation can go any number of ways depending upon which motion is filed, which witness is not available, what evidence is not available. But what I want you guys to understand is that because of the sheer volume, of cases that we were prosecuting, it was necessary to create a system. We had to create a process. That was the only way we were going to be successful in prosecuting thousands of cases, guys, thousands of cases. So why is that relevant to you? What I want to say to you is understanding that in a law firm, you might have thought that the attorneys that were actually in court, the ones that were actually in trial, right? The ones that were actually drafting the pleadings, you would have thought that at a law firm, the most important people in the room were the attorneys. Well, I'm here to tell you, not so much. And here's why not. Because the value in that law firm was a person that knew how to take all those thousands of cases and create a system, so that we were able to prosecute those cases again legally, efficiently, timely, and without breaking the firm. I can tell you that there were law firms that pre-existed the law firm that we worked at, we call them white shoe law firms, meaning they were the top of the top. They tried to get into this high volume foreclosure space and it killed them. It crushed them. Because they tried to litigate those cases the same way, that volume of cases, the same way that they would litigate a smaller number of cases, and you just cannot do that. So the moral of the story is, what I want to tell you guys today is, after you have learned the substance of the service that you provide, to the one that knows how to take that process, take that service offering and create a systematic process for delivering that service, you're going to win. Let me tell you why you're going to win. You're going to win because you're going to be able to handle a higher volume of purchases and sales than the next person that's kind of winging it, right? So again, moral of the story from my prior life is it was the operations team. It was the team that knew how to take all of these cases and say, okay, let's sort these out. Here's some steps, and here's these steps, and here's how you do this, and here's how you can quickly move through these matters. That's where the volume was. That's what the volume was. Because when I tell you guys, look at it this way: if you create a system, you can place bodies in that system, and you'll always win, right? So I wrote down some quotes for you guys to again anchor us in this conversation before we get into the checklist. And so the first thing I want to go over, I wrote down the definition of system. This is from Webster. So it says an organized or established procedure. An organized or established procedure. An organized or established procedure. My phone will do not disturb. An organized or established procedure. What I see is a lot of professionals are not organized. And so it's just pure chaos, right? Chaos in your head, it's chaos in your transaction, that chaos spills over to your customers, it spills over into, your interactions with the other realtors and all your vendors, right? So these 4 weeks, I want you guys to get a framework, a system around making sure you're organized in your contract to close process, all right? So that's the definition of system. Another quote says, I'm going to start here because I know sometimes you hear the word system and you're like, that sounds so sophisticated. Guys, if you do something every day, that's a system. Many of you probably wake up. Unfortunately, many of you probably check your phone first. Shouldn't, but when you get up, think about what do we say, our cruise control that you just automatically do every morning. You get up, probably grab your phone, go to the bathroom. If you wear corrective lenses, you might put on your glasses, you might put on contacts, right? If you're one that you go to the gym, you probably wash your face, put on your gym attire. That's a system. It's just got to the point where you do it so much that it's in your head, right? So you don't need a checklist for that. Where the checklist comes in is if, for example, let's say, for example, my has a process, but she needs Jovi to follow her process. And she needs all of us on this call to follow her process. For Jovi to be successful in that, Mai's gonna need to do what? Tell us what you do, Mai. Like, we need to write it down because that's the only way all of us are gonna be able to do what you do. Exactly, right? And so that's what a checklist is doing. That's what a system. I have a way that I do things. When I write it down, that's my procedures. That's my written way that I do things. And a checklist is just a very abstract way of doing the things that I do. Does that make sense? So you're just making it all more efficient. I'm gonna use another example for you. To try and I guess elaborate or show you the example between procedures and the checklist. When I studied for the bar exam, we had like 17 subjects or more, maybe like 23 subjects that we had to know. Now, those 23 subjects were books of information. In order to be successful, in order to be prepared to take the bar exam, guess what we all did? Well, at least I did. I know the majority, I hope they did, but what I know I did, I got all 23 of those subjects down to a single sheet. And you just get down, you get it down to its most essential parts. Now, it doesn't mean I don't know the volumes of books that we study, but I got it down to its most essential part so that it triggered me, okay, here's the next part that you need to know when you take this bar exam. So that's what the checklist is for, all right? So 80% of your problems, this is another good quote, 80% of your problems are not people problems. This is for those of you who may have already ventured into hiring. You're like, oh my God, I just cannot. I'm never hiring again. Trust me, every CEO has this thought process. Anyone who's ever hired someone, you've had an experience where you're like, just forget, I'll just do it myself. Well, you can't. You can't. You can't. If Jeff Bezos, and if any of you guys know me, you know that's one of my heroes. If Jeff Bezos was to say it's just going to be me and these three guys with me that's going to continue to wrap these books, we would never have Amazon. Like you just can't. Right. And so the way that he was able to create Amazon was to create systems. And of course, there's a whole lot to that. You know, you got technology and all those different things. But ultimately, guys, realize that Amazon is nothing but a system. And all these businesses that go big and okay, let's be even more relevant. Chick-fil-A. Everyone's like, man, Chick-fil-A is just amazing. Guess what? They have a system. They have a system. There's systematic things about the way that Chick-fil-A does business that you guys don't even realize. Where they stand, how they greet you, how they take your order, how the order is then delivered to the restaurant. It's all systematic so that they can efficiently make sure that every customer is timely serviced and they all get, for the most part, the same experience. Now, I know most people, I'm sure probably about 99% of people should say they've not had a bad experience at Chick-fil-A. I know my husband recently did, but for the most part, everyone like says Chick-fil-A is a standard of a good experience, right? Because their experience is systematic. And so again, that ties us back into the purpose of this conversation, which is to make sure that every buyer and seller that you service, if you have a system, they'll all have the same experience and hopefully it's a great experience. All right. All right. So with that being said, now that I hope that I made my case to you guys about why you should never, after today, wing it with your closing process, let's get into this checklist from today forward. Hopefully, again, like I said, you probably will add to this. Minnie, drop in the chat, please, the link to the handout because we have some folks that are still coming in. Guys, those of you that are just coming in, we are straight handout today. So in the chat is the handout. We're just going to review the handout, right? So countdown to closing, setting the stage for success. So for those of you who I have not had a chance to meet before, I see a lot of familiar faces. For those who I have not, is there anyone that's your first time joining us on a Thursday? Because I know I just got right into it because majority of us meet every Thursday. Can I see your hands in the chat if you've never joined us on a Thursday webinar? And if not, we're going to keep scrolling. First time, Lourdes, really? All right, Lourdes, you get a formal introduction. Lourdes, nice to virtually meet you. So my name is Ray Cole Jackson. I'm a South Florida real estate attorney. Dave, you've never been on by either. All right, well, we got a couple people. I got to stop taking for granted that we're all you. We love you too, Lori. So formal introduction. My name is Ray Cole Jackson. So I'm a South Florida real estate attorney. As you can see on the screen, a little bit about me. I am originally from Miami. Go Gators. I got my undergrad at the University of Florida. I went on to obtain my law degree from Santa Clara University School of Law in California. While in Santa Clara, I was the founder of the Real Estate Law Society. I love real estate. I'm just being honest with you, like all things real estate. You Lord, you love me already. All things real estate. I'm willing to have that conversation. So came back home to Miami and got my LLM in real property development from the University of Miami School of Law. That is essentially a specialization. An LLM is a specialization for attorneys in whatever their practice area may be. Oftentimes you see it in tax, estate planning. Mine is in real estate. Duh. I'm a proud licensed Florida Realtor. I was first licensed in California. Also a licensed mortgage loan officer in Florida. And so I've always, the purpose of gathering each Thursday, each Thursday with the group is just to, hey, Jari, good to see you. Is to just make sure that I used the term last time, we want to collapse decades into days. And also, if there's an opportunity for me to collapse all of this, guys, that I've done, all this schooling that I've done and I continue to do, and just give it to you guys in a checklist, I'm here for it, right? I'm here for it. Many of you, I enjoy learning. Some of you are like, it's all right. Like, I only need to know, tell me what I need to know of all of this, Ray Cole. So that's what our Thursdays are for, right? I'm going to tell you what you need to know, give you all the information. And then, like I mentioned, this month, we're going to come back and we're going to condense this into an actionable checklist. By the time we end this training series this month, you guys are going to have contract to close checklists that I suggest that you consider deploying in your business. So today we're talking about the first 72 hours. That's the first 3 days of contract to close. So why are we speaking about this specifically? Why does this matter? The first 72 hours after the contract acceptance, it sets the tone for the entire transaction. This is super important. Acting quickly builds client confidence, keeps deadlines on track, and prevents costly mistakes. By establishing systems early, realtors position themselves as organized professionals and trusted advisors throughout the process. So, prime example, I know that you close many deals, right? Like it's second nature to you now. But for many of your clients, they're first time home buyers, they're first time sellers. So it is completely lost on them what's next, like what this is all about. One of my favorite ones are those who might have purchased a property a long time ago and they come to closing, like a buyer comes to closing or a seller comes to closing, they expect to see the buyer on the other side of the table. They're like, where is everybody? I'm like, well, the seller signed last week, right? Just you, me, just us. Thanks, Sabrina. And so my point is, like, the way we do business now, or we conduct our closings now, is much different, even if you have a buyer or seller who has purchased or sold a property before. All right. And so you want to make sure that they're not concerned. I'm going to tell you some of the concerns that I hear. You guys probably hear it too. Buyers, when we say you need to make a wire, and they're like, they've never done a wire before, and they're like, oh boy, a wire, like, what does that mean? And how do I do that? And do I need to go into the bank, or can I do it from my phone, or can I just send a check, or right? And so these are some of the things that we're talking to them about, even in our consultation, but certainly by the time we go into contract, we said, remember, we talked about you're going to need to make a wire for your earnest money deposit, right? And so the closing agent is going to provide you with your wire instructions, right? And so those types of things will lower the concerns and the angst of your customers when you give them that information right away, right? So you're building confidence. You're also going to make sure that you know your deadlines. We want to end this in the checklist. Many of you that have it. Many, look at the chat. Many of you that have it. Matter of fact, hold on one second. Let me see if I can do this. Copy link. Oh, she just dropped it in the chat. There you go. For those of you who look forward in the checklist, you see that we have a step where we have a step on there where you need to lay out your deadline, right? And again, this will prevent deadly mistakes. All right. So let's look at the checklist. Day 1. Now, I'm going to save this point until we get through so we can see this first. So the first thing you want to do, you're under contract. You want to confirm that the contract is fully executed with all pagers and writers attached. Now, some of this you're going to be like, really, Ray Cole? Yes, because we get contracts that are incomplete. All pages are not executed. Writers are missing. And so you want to make sure that you receive all. And the thing I want to make sure I point out here too is if you guys have attended, for example, the contract class, again, if you've attended the title process class and you attended the agent anatomy of a transaction class, this checklist is going to tie in a lot of those concepts that we discussed, right? And so this point about confirming that the contract is fully executed with all writers attached, remember I told you guys before, there are some writers, for example, that have time periods that allow the buyer to cancel the contract if they don't receive the writer, right? HOA writer, condo writer. So you want to make sure that all pages of the writers, all writers and all pages of the contract are attached when you determine that you have a fully executed contract. All right. Then the realtor is going to deliver the executed contract to their transaction coordinator. Who does not have a transaction coordinator? In the chat. If you don't have a transaction coordinator, say me, 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 me. I need him. Okay. Yes, you do need one, Bruno. Me. I said I was not going to make this point. Real Charlie said yes, says too. I said I wasn't going to make this point until the end, but I'm going to make it now. I intentionally made sure that the tasks that were assigned to the realtor versus the transaction coordinator versus the closing agent are three different colors. Here's why. This was intentional. Because I want you guys to see this is a completely different conversation, but it's related. I want you guys to see just how much of this needs to be done by a transaction coordinator. This is just the first 3 days. Look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 steps versus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to the realtor. Twice as many tasks are with the transaction coordinator. For those of you that said me, you're looking at in day 3 having 18 tasks versus 6. Uh-oh. Anybody got a mind bomb? 18 tasks. That's huge leverage. Exactly, Jari. So I intentionally made this a different color because I make this case for a transaction coordinator, and some realtors like, I don't need it. Yes, you do. Like time, leverage is a training all by itself. Jari, thank you for that. Leverage is a training all by itself that we're going to talk about, and that is exactly why I made this a different color. Going back to the Jeff Bezos example, could he possibly? This man is international. If he had said, "I got it, I'll do it," we would not have Amazon. So I want you guys to think about, how do I remove those? You always think about, what is my highest and best use? What is my highest and best use? Audit your day. Audit your day. And you're doing, as you go through things that you're doing each day, you say, is this something that someone else, is this my highest and best use? Meaning, is this something that someone else can be doing? And is this, and more importantly, is this something that comes up on every transaction that someone else should be able to do or should be doing? And what we're going over during this month is going to be things that come up essentially in every transaction, meaning you should find someone to do these other things immediately. All right. So the next step for the realtor is delivering the executed contract to the transaction coordinator. So that was a small step, right? Delivery to the transaction coordinator. And then the transaction coordinator is going to be your second set of eyes to confirm that the contract is fully executed with all pages and riders attached. I'll be honest with you. There are some things that I'll look at, I'll be like, oh, it's great. And my closer will look at it, and because that's her highest and best use, she'll see an I is not dotted, a T is not crossed. And I'm like, you know what, you're right. That's why I need to stay out of your business. That's what you should be doing. Because my mind is on the more important piece. But as a closer, that's what she's focused on. And so as a transaction coordinator, don't feel bad if they catch something that you didn't catch. It shouldn't be anything huge, but don't feel bad. They're like, oh, here's a missing initial. It shouldn't happen often, but that's the purpose of the transaction coordinator, another set of eyes for you. All right. Now here's a huge task of the 18. Preparation of the transaction summary sheet that includes all key parties and deadlines. Guys, this is huge. This is property goes under contract. The transaction coordinator is going to create your checklist. What is our effective date? This goes back to another training. Making sure you confirm for your transaction coordinator, what is our effective date? That's the date when the fully executed contract has been delivered to the other party. That is the effective date. And we know that we are counting our deadline from the effective date. So your transaction sheet should have, as a matter of fact, we have some a version of it in Anatomy of a Transaction. Anatomy of a Transaction handout. If you are in the school community, you should be able to access Anatomy of a Transaction handout, and it should have contract abstract timeline in that handout. And it's an example of how you're going to lay out each of these deadlines. Okay. Your transaction coordinator should create an outline of your deadline. This is huge. The effective date, when is the escrow deposit due? If there's a second escrow deposit, when is that due? The inspection period end date, association application deadline, loan application deadline, appraisal deadline, loan approval deadline, association approval deadline, and then your closing date. All of that should be laid out. Of course, this is going to be shared with your client, right? Now, the transaction coordinator is going to prepare this sheet, but the realtor, you should review it and confirm that it's correct. Why? As a matter of fact, this is actually duplicated, guys. You actually only have, I said 6, that means this is 5. So here's a duplicate. You only have 5 tasks of 17. That's even less if you have a transaction coordinator. The reason why you need to review the transaction summary, why? Because ultimately you're the realtor, right? And so if there's any issues with the dates, deadline calculations, ultimately it flows up to you, right? But it doesn't hurt to have leverage. You check their work. And then once you've confirmed that it's accurate, it's going to be up to the transaction coordinator to make sure that they track those deadlines, right? Right. So once this is confirmed, then your transaction coordinator is going to send a next steps email to the client, introducing all parties, right? Introducing the client, the lender. They're gonna send an email to the closing agent saying buyer name, seller name. You say who the lender is, who's holding title, who's the title agent, who's holding escrow. Remember, that could be 2 different entities, right? If you're with a brokerage such as like Kai's generally holds their buyers escrow deposit, even though another office is conducting the closing, right? Introducing the transaction coordinator, and then outlining the closing process and key dates. These systems are going to create a next level experience for your customer. They're gonna be like, oh, I feel taken care of. I feel insulated in this unfamiliar space of purchasing a house. It's a lot coming at them all at one time. I'm gonna give you context. A buyer, for example, has a closing agent, has an inspector, has an appraiser that's probably going to be calling them, has their lender that's going to be calling them, the lender's processor, your transaction coordinator. At any given time, they could have 7 different people reaching out to them. They have homeowners insurance they need to purchase. How can I insulate my buyer, insulate my seller to make them feel safe in this unfamiliar space? Checklist, right? So they're going to deliver the contract once the transaction coordinator we've confirmed our timeline, we've delivered to our customer the next steps email. They're going to deliver the contract to the closing agent. Again, this is something that you don't have to do. They're going to deliver the contract to the closing agent with their timeline, with their introduction, right? After that, the closing agent is going to initiate intake of the buyer, seller, realtors, and the lender, right? They're going to initiate their intake. They need to reach out. Here's your intake form. Here's your intake form. Now, one thing that I left out on here, and I'm going to make sure I add it for the community. What I suggest agents, here's another hack. Because remember, with system, what are we trying to? We're trying to save time. I'm going to send you guys for those of you that are in the community, I'm going to give you an outline for a realtor intake sheet. And it's going to have all the information that every closing agent is going to ask you for anyway. So why are we taking our time to wait for them to send us a form to fill out when we know they're going to ask for our brokerage name, brokerage address, license number, your name, your license number, your address, your client name, what's your commission? I would suggest to you that you include on there, if by chance they're like title experts, we like to wire all of our disbursements. Send your wire instructions. Send my proceeds to a DA will be provided to you. You get what I'm saying? So you want to drive the transaction from the beginning. Look how professional you look to the closing agent. They're like, man, I don't even have to send them an intake form. They've given me all their intake information. This realtor This realtor is not new to this process, right? So we're going to make sure that we share that. Many remind me to make sure that we put that in the community. All right. The closing agent is going to provide the buyer wire instructions. The closing agent is going to provide the buyer the wire instructions. You do not, reminder, do not, realtors do not share wire instructions. You don't ever want that to be anything that your buyer expects from you. And that's to prevent wire fraud, right? Because we don't want them to have a situation. You want them to be trained to know that you're only going to expect wire instructions from the closing agent, not anyone else. So if by chance they receive an email from some other random person, oftentimes it's a spoof email posing to be you. I'm just going to be honest with you. Sometimes it oftentimes poses to be the realtor. Sometimes it poses to be the closing agent. But if they ever pose to be you, you've already trained your buyer to know, Jari said he doesn't send wire instructions. So I know this is not right, right? So the closing agent on day one is going to provide the wire instructions to the buyer. Day two, that's a lot, all in day one, right? That's a lot just in day one. And so do you want to be spending your time doing this, or do you want to be spending your time getting the next person under contract or getting the next seller listing agreement executed? So as was mentioned earlier, this is a conversation not just about systems, but it also show you how if you have a system, you have built-in leverage for someone else to do the work while you're focused on your highest and best use. All right. All right. Day two, your transaction coordinator. I see your question in the chat, Jari. I'll get right to you. Day two, your transaction coordinator is going to ensure that all your deadlines are calendared into a transaction management system and reminder set. Many transaction coordinators, they're professional. They have a transaction coordination system, right? They're either using Loop sometimes, Transaction Desk. There's another one that escapes my memory right now. I'm thinking right about it right now, but your transaction coordinator should have a system to calendar your deadlines, right? To calendar your deadlines. You want to make sure that they are calendared with reminders set. And I would also recommend to you that those reminders be set not for the date of, but at least the day before, most preferably 2 days before, right? It's because things happen, right? Day two, you're likely going to be confirming that the inspection is for a buyer is scheduled with the client's chosen inspector, right? During your consultation, you've probably given them 3 options of an inspector. Again, another tie-in, you do not want to tell your client which inspector to use, just because in the event the inspector misses something, you don't want the client to come back and say, well, you chose that inspector, and they impute the inspector's error to you, right? All right. Day two, you want to confirm the association application and approval process has been initiated, if applicable, right? If your buyer's purchasing in an association managed community, you want to make sure by day two that application is started, or at least find out what the process is, because you would hate to be in an association that's only open from 1:15 to 1:30 every third Tuesday. What? Like, that's pretty extreme, but I've seen associations that have some very challenging hours. And so for that reason, you do not want to wait until the last minute to at least find out what the association approval process is. Now, the reason why I say find out is because during this time period, you're going to have your inspection period, right? So you want to make sure that you're going to proceed with the transaction, but at least know what your timetable looks like for association approval. By day two, your transaction coordinator should be reaching out to confirm that the buyer's wires, earnest money deposit has been received, right? Or that they've received the wire instructions. Sometimes day one, depending upon the timing that the contract has come in, the buyer may get the wire instructions late. They didn't check their email. They don't know they missed it. So by day two, you want to reach out to confirm that they've received the wire instructions. Now, I want to say one thing. This timeline obviously assumes that you are going to follow the traditional 3 days to make the escrow deposit. If your contract says that the escrow deposit needs to be made in a day, then obviously this is different. I don't recommend that. But the contract, the way it's drafted, if left blank, it's 3 days is the default. And even when it's written in, most agents write in 3 days. So this timeline is drafted for a 3-day escrow deposit deadline. Just keep that in mind, right? I'm going to put an asterisk on here for the next time to remind myself of that too, right? Now, assuming you have not completed, you don't have your standard intake form that we just talked about, then your transaction coordinator should be by day 2 completing your intake form. Most closing agents by day 1, day 2, they're sending out an intake form to the realtors. Your transaction coordinator can do that. And you would even make sure in your initial reach out to the closing agent, send me anything that you need. The transaction coordinator is saying, send me anything that you need from the realtor. Send me anything you need from Lori. Again, this is your leverage. Lori's out getting more buyers in the contract. Lori's out getting more houses on the market. That is not, completing a realtor intake form is not Lori's highest and best use. Do not do that. All right. By day 2, you also should be requesting a draft settlement statement to confirm preliminary figures such as purchase price, credits to the buyer, for example, so seller credits, your commission, meaning how much and who's supposed to pay it. Again, I remind you guys all the time, we're in a different market now where you have buyers that are paying commissions. So you want to make sure that that figure is on the settlement statement and that is being charged to the appropriate party. And then, of course, fees, such as your transaction fee. Make sure that is on there. Again, from the beginning, you want to make sure that these figures are on here because you don't want to wait until the end because by chance, all of a sudden the buyer's saying or a seller's saying, well, I didn't know about that. No, it's been on here from the beginning. All right. All right. Lastly, day 3. Day 3. By now, we should have made an escrow deposit. By now, we should be receiving an escrow letter. And oh, by the way, who's requesting it? The transaction coordinator, right? By day 3, you should have conducted your property inspection and you should have some reports to review. That's your job. That's your job. Now, you might, depending upon your volume and depending upon the experience of your transaction coordinator, you may delegate an initial review to your transaction coordinator. There are licensed realtors who act as transaction coordinators. They have experience. They're simply their strength, their strong suit is administrative work, right? We know that in the field is sales. Some realtors have deemed them to be their strong suit is operations, right? And so they may have the experience and the knowledge to conduct an initial review, but the final determination on that inspection report is between you and the customer, right? We don't leave that with the transaction coordinator. And then we already know also the next one is negotiating repairs, negotiate repair requests and document agreements in a fully executed addendum. So that's related to the inspection. Negotiate repair requests. We've reviewed the inspection report. We say the septic needs work. How much are we is it something that needs to be repaired before we close, or can we get a credit? If we're getting a credit, we need to make sure that we confirm the amount and that the agreement concerning the inspection is in a fully executed addendum before the inspection period ends. I want to say this again, because now we're pivoting into the contract class. If your inspection period ends today, today's the 4th, it's not okay that you guys are texting about, oh, yeah, I agree. Yeah, Hansel, sure. Yep, 10 grand. Yep, we're going to give you a full. Yeah, no, as a matter of fact, 20 grand. Yep. But you don't get anything signed. And you try and continue this conversation tomorrow. Guess what? We'll see. Your inspection period ended today. If you had terms that needed to change related to the results of that inspection, you have to ensure that they are documented in an addendum, fully executed prior to the end of the inspection period. Do I need to repeat that? That's important. It doesn't matter. The realtors could have all time. They could even have an agreement in writing. The contract is between the buyer and the seller. So the parties that need to be bound to that agreement, they're the ones that must sign an addendum or sign the documentation. All right. All right. Perfect. So we've gotten through intake. We've made our escrow deposit. We've gotten through inspection. Next step for the transaction coordinator, reassure the client with a brief check-in, call or email. We're on track. Inspections are completed. Title work is underway. We will update you as we move through the next steps. That's 3 days of work. That's a lot that happens in the first 3 days, right? It's a lot that happens. But if we have this checklist, we're not going to miss any of it. This is a lot. You could, if you had to do this all in your head. All right, those of you that don't have a checklist, who doesn't have a checklist? You don't have to say it in the chat. But for those of you who prior to now did not have a checklist, can you now see how, ooh, that was a lot to remember in the first 3 days. You don't have to remember it anymore. Now you have a checklist, all right? Pro tip, as we wrap up, document everything. You wanna make sure you save emails, forms, receipts in a centralized file, either a cloud folder, your CRM, transaction coordination system. This will save time and reduce stress later in the transaction. Right? That was 3 days. That's a lot of work. I can tell you guys the heaviest part of the transaction is really when you open that file. Because of all this that has to be done. This is a big lift. This is a big lift to get the file opened and set up. This is your foundation. So this is the last parable, I guess I'll share. Think about when you're building a house, right? You put a lot of work into the foundation, or if you're building a large structure, they say the foundation goes very deep because you have a large structure going up. So I want you guys to look at these first 3 days, particularly regarding contract executed, making sure that your dates are good, making sure that your customer has their next steps outlined. Look at that as your foundation. And if your foundation is good, then you should have a smooth runway to closing. You should have a smooth runway to closing. Now, over the next 3 sessions, we're gonna go the next milestone, right? Talking about the different steps in this process. Of course, loan approval, right? Title clearing matters, right? Then by the 3rd session, we're talking about right before closing. That's another lift. That's another lift because by that point, you need to make sure that you have your loan approval. If it's a finance transaction, you want to make sure we have loan approval. We want to make sure we have title clear. We want to make sure that everything is in a bow and ready for closing, right? So your biggest lifts are going to be intake and pre-clear to close. Those are your biggest lifts, right? All right. Questions. So Jari had a question. Jari said, is it good business to be included on? Absolutely. Absolutely. So Jari's question is, should he be included on all email communications? 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. Call me OCD. Here's why. Because number one, it's your transaction. It's your transaction. No one said that you don't have to drive it, but it's your transaction. You still want to remain front and center as the realtor on the transaction. And so I do not recommend that the transaction coordinator communicates directly with your buyer or seller without you CC'd on the communication. Also, it'll give you an opportunity to see oftentimes, what's going well or what can be tweaked. Because what happens is as you see the customer's questions for clarification, you say, okay, we need to add that to our process. So Dave's question is a very good question. He said, what are some critical questions we should ask the TC when interviewing them? Good question. So first of all, Dave, if you do not already have a transaction management system that you work in, I would ask them what system do they work in to manage your timelines, right? And then number 2, how do you get access to or see where they are in your timelines to make sure that steps are being hit, right? Secondly, I would ask them how much work, what's their workload? Do they have support? Right? How many people, how many realtors are they working with? What's their hours, right? What's their availability? I would not to have a transaction coordinator say, "Oh, I always have my phone on me." Like that's cute, but that's not a sustainable model. Um, like it or not, I always say I'm in real estate, not in law enforcement or medical. There's no emergencies at 11 o'clock at night. I'm so very sorry. Plan appropriately, right? So businesses have business hours, and so although, like I said, although it sounds attractive to have a TC that says, "I always have my phone on me. I'm always available." Don't go for it. We need business hours. All right. Um, I would want to know what their experience level is. So again, remember, like I said, I have some transaction coordinators that I work with. They're realtors, they're licensed realtors, and so they have experience. And so the insight that they have into the transaction process is um, more expansive than someone who does not have real estate experience. So I would ask about that. Um, of course, their fees. There are some transaction coordinators that charge a fee at file open just because of the amount of work that it takes to open the file. Um, and of course, that's deducted from the full fee. What else? So Jari had to go. He said if they sick or go on vacation, who do they have to work on the file, right? So their availability, who's their backup, right? Do they have backup? That's a good one. I would definitely not work with a transaction coordinator that doesn't have backup. Would not. And I treat that the same way. I recommend this a lot. Like for example, there's solo attorneys. I cannot. I don't understand that. There's no way possible. I don't understand. And similarly, I'm gonna gut punch you guys. I don't understand a solo realtor. You don't have to be. Transaction coordinators are out there for a reason. And so one of the things I've mentioned in past trainings with realtors on the topic of leverage and on the topic topic of business planning, the fact, guys, that you guys have access to staffing that you do not pay until you get paid is huge. Salaries as a business owner is one of your largest expenses. And traditionally, as a business owner, you have to pay your staff whether you make money or not, right? You have to pay your staff whether the products are being purchased, the services are being retained or not. Versus with the transaction coordinator model, they are paid when you're paid. That is crazy. If I could staff my business under that model, just all transaction coordination type model, you guys, it would just be crazy, right? Right. So that's another reason why I 100% suggest that everyone starts interviewing and make sure that you hire a transaction coordinator. All right. You're welcome, Dave. Any other questions? Any other question? Clear as mud? All right. Drop the handout one more time in the chat, Minnie. We have some good. Thanks. I'm glad you got some value. We have some people that just dropped in 1250. We did pretty good. Oh, thanks, Michelle. All right, guys. So next week, session 2, we will be discussing milestones, tasks. I'm glad, Lori. We're going to be discussing your task management, and follow-up to make sure that the meat of it, right? The title clearing, the loan underwriting process is available. Where in school? You should be able to find it in the classroom, Cynthia. If you are in the school community, you should have it. It should be in the classroom. And I'm going to assume that it's going to be part of the anatomy of a transaction training, because we generally have it in that that handout. I saw you, Chandra, from Fort Lauderdale. You came in very late. Sure, get them on. The training is free, Jar. Everybody can join. As a matter of fact, feel free to invite any of your realtor colleagues, your transaction coordinator for sure, senior transaction coordinators, because again, they need to know what you guys do, right? They need to know the business. All right. In the chat, Minnie dropped the link to our Google review. We are building our Google review for purchase ready. If you found value in today's training, we would appreciate a 5-star review. That's the very insignificant cost of entry today. All right. All right, guys, you guys have been great. If nothing else, check the chat. Perfect. Yes. I'm glad. Thanks, guys. All right. I'm glad you guys have found. I'm glad you clear as. I'm glad. I'm glad. I'm glad. This is what I want. I want everybody to feel like, okay, I got it now. I got it now. All right. All right. Um, did I give y'all this last quote before I let you go? You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So you have aspirations to do 10 deals a month, but you don't have systems to do 10 deals a month. So you're not going to do 10 deals a month. I'm going to make it very practical. Not that you can't. Here's why you're not going to be able to do 10 deals a month. You're not going to be able to do 10 deals a month because you don't have the time. You don't have the leverage. We talked about it. There's 24 hours in a day. The way that you create more time, in a day is to leverage. You borrow, you utilize other people's 24 hours, right? The transaction coordinator, right? A showing assistant. That's a whole nother conversation. But at the very least, for the purposes of today's conversation or this month's conversation, the transaction coordinator is going to be your first piece of leverage built into your system. We do not rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. Goal is here, 10 transactions a month. Well, your system only allows you to buy 2, sister. So it's coming down, right? So this month, we're going to make sure that these systems rise to the level that we can hit what we aspire to, our goal for our business. All right. Why did I say that? Because it hits me all the time. Yes, delegate. All right, guys. All right, we're going this time for real. See y'all later. Have a great weekend. See you next Thursday. Bye. Thanks, Minnie.